Hello and welcome to the quarterfinals here at coverage of U.S. Nationals. Maria Bartholdi in the booth, joined by Reed Duke, Kevin Jones, and Owen Turtenwald. Our first matchup here that we're going to get a chance to see: black-red in the hands of Owen Turtenwald versus Jeskai Control in the hands of Kevin Jones. Owen Turtenwald's leaving up the same 75 he brought to the Pro Tour, so he knows the deck and he knows it well. Kevin Jones loves to play Jeskai and is bringing his own unique take on the Control deck that we've seen kind of in the metagame. Blue-white control, adding red in here for cheap creature interaction.
Very excited to watch this matchup. I think if you pulled both players aside and interviewed them about what's going to happen, both players would be confident. They would both tell you that they're ahead or going to have a great chance of winning the matchup. And we're going to see, who can actually follow through on that. Kevin built his deck with beating red in mind, all those cheap red removal spells, and shifting from the classic control version in order to gain edge in this matchup. But Owen, of course, has a tremendous amount of accomplishments with this black-red deck. He knows how to navigate these matchups. He knows how to make things as hard on the control player as possible, and he's got the weapons as well.
Two of those weapons in the graveyard already. 2 copies of Goblin Chainwhirlers met with 2 copies of Disallow from Kevin Jones. And here we go. It's a Teferi from Kevin Jones.
So if you'll notice the sequence from last turn, Owen put Goblin Chainwhirler onto the stack, and the first thing Kevin did was he cycled Censor. So that, to me, indicates that, number one, he had Disallow as an answer to the Goblin Chainwhirler, and number two, he wanted to play Teferi on his turn. So potentially he had Teferi missing the untapped land and decided to cycle Censor to find it. But in either case, Kevin really in the driver's seat now, being able to slam Teferi on an empty board. Owen missing land drops. Great spot for Kevin Jones.
Bomat Courier here for Owen Turtenwald. Nick's Teferi Hero of Minaria down to 4, but Kevin Jones just going to plus it back up right away to 5. And here is a search for Kevin Jones. So is Owen Turtenwald already too far behind in this game?
He's really far behind. From this position where the control player has Teferi at a reasonable loyalty, has their mana open, they're not at a low life total, something has to go wrong for the control player to lose. Owen needs to both continuously present threats, and Kevin needs to miss a beat somewhere. The top of his library has to run off in an awkward fashion. He has to not have an answer at the right time, and it's just going to be really tough. Owen, of course, consummate professional, is going to keep playing, but he is a big underdog from this position.
Bomat Courier hitting the red zone here for Owen Turtenwald. Harness Lightning, the response from Kevin Jones. Will be enough to send the robot mailman to the graveyard. Teferi sticks around. 2 energy for Kevin. And Owen throws the turn back over to Kevin Jones. Used a lightning strike last turn, by the way, to knock Teferi down to 2.
Okay, so Kevin resolved his search for his Kanta ability, and now Owen's taking action in Kevin's upkeep before the card is drawn, and he's able to take out the Teferi. So,
wow.
So, not going to say Owen's winning, but he's got a shot if this,
Other Teferi wasn't here. Yeah, another Teferi here for Kevin Jones, right after Owen put quite a lot of work into dealing with the first one. Owen's still on 3 lands. Here's a Goblin Chainwhirler. Met with a Syncopate from Jones. Search for Azcanta is going to give Jones a scry.
So from this position, it's pretty much academic. Owen is not in a position to cast multiple spells in the same turn. Kevin has answers. He's got a full hand. He's got a high life total. Teferi's ticking up to 6 this turn, and now he is transformed as Azcanta. So what I said a moment ago about Kevin needing to miss a beat, it's now becoming almost impossible from a card standpoint for Kevin's deck to not deliver the answers he needs. So it would take, essentially a miracle, probably take Kevin making a severe mistake for Owen to get back into this game.
So we've already got one Azcanta the Sunken Ruin in play now, and a second search for Azcanta from Kevin Jones. And here, Torrential Gearhulk is going to have something to say about that Chandra, which you said could be a major player in this matchup, but no can do here for Owen. There's a look at Torrential Gearhulk, which has been out of the spotlight for a little while.
A lot of times you see this in the sideboard for control players, but Kevin just right back to playing it into the main deck. He's got it alongside Glimmer of Genius, which of course has been an amazing pairing ever since the printing of Kaladesh.
Whirler Virtuoso here for Kevin Jones, another one of the benefit of playing the colors that he's playing. Gearhulk smashes in for 5. Owen Turtonwald down to 15. Teferi ticks up. 6 energy for Jones as well at the ready. Pia Nalar for Owen. Torrential Gearhulk number 2 disallow, and Owen Turtonwald has seen quite enough. That is game number 1 of this quarterfinals going to Kevin Jones with his Jeskai control deck versus Owen Turtonwald's Black-Red.
Worth noting, these two players have both played on the national team and together nonetheless. So these guys were teammates. They know each other well, know each other's weaknesses. Not that either of them have many weaknesses.
Reminder that the 2 top finishers here at this tournament each get a spot on the Magic World Cup team for the U.S., along with the top pro point earner as captain.
So Owen lost game 1. We did not see the Chandra Torch of Defiance dynamic that I had hinted at. Kevin was ready by that point with a disallow. But Chandra is going to remain a super powerful card, and Owen even gets additional tools to try to force it through in the form of Duress and Doomfall. However, the probably single most impactful sideboard card on either side is going to be 2 copies of Chandra's Defeat for Kevin Jones. So that's his one way to directly get a Chandra off the battlefield. Of course, just a super efficient removal spell. We could see him cast it on a Glorybringer, on a Rekindling Phoenix, on a Goblin Chain Whirler. 1 mana to kill most of the cards in Owen's deck, including the very best one, Chandra Torch of Defiance.
What is Owen's plan here as far as sideboarding goes?
So Owen gets to bring in the black cards. This is where his decision to play red-black instead of just mono-red is actually going to pay him off, as he gets to bring in 4 Duresses. That can strip away Teferi, strip away a counterspell to help him force through one of those bigger threats. And those bigger threats like Chandra, Hazoret, and Glorybringer, it doesn't take much for them to win the game. You know, just clearing the way, getting that disallow out of there. It's only an attack or 2 uncontested that Glorybringer or Hazoret's going to take. So the black card's definitely a big impact. Owen's going to tailor his removal suite to match up as well as possible against Kevin's creatures. So that probably means he's not going to be using the Magma Sprays, might be sideboarding out whatever he thinks is the worst out of Lightning Strike, Abrade, and Unlicensed Disintegration, and choosing removal spells that can punish Kevin when he flashes in Torrential Gearhulk, or if he has to play out a Whirler Virtuoso. So for me, I'm thinking Unlicensed Disintegration is probably the best card to have a small number of copies of, just because it is so punishing. If he can get Kevin into a spot where he's got to flash in a Torrential Gearhulk during combat, Unlicensed Disintegration takes care of anything, unleashes 3 damage, potentially, if it's paired with a Bomat Courier, Scrapheap Scrounger, Heart of Kirin. So that's a card I think Owen will probably leave some number of copies in his deck, but potentially take out the Lightning Strike, trim on the Abrade. He'll make his best judgment call as to how much removal to leave in.
Which of these decks, by the way, there's a look at Kevin Jones's Jeskai control deck and the sideboard, do you think is favored post-board?
Well, Kevin gets the best sideboard card in Chandra's Defeat, but Owen gets a lot more sideboard cards, and he actually, if you take a look at Kevin's main deck, there's not any obvious cards that are bad in the matchup that he gets to swap or upgrade, whereas Owen does get to take out those removal spells and just make his deck more threat-dense and back up the most important threats with the discard spells. So I think Owen's deck is going to change more, whereas Kevin's just dealing with some minor upgrades here and there. I think Owen will probably gain a tiny bit of ground after sideboarding, but it's going to remain a really, really close matchup that either player can win.
And you talk about Owen being able to kind of transform his deck post-sideboard, and we hear about transformative, quote-unquote, transformative sideboarding as well in decks. Exactly how flexible is the black-red deck to be one thing or another?
It's very flexible. The black and red colors, in general, in Standard, they have a lot of the best answers for any situation. I mean, red has the best removal, and when you pair it with Unlicensed Disintegration, that really covers your bases against just about anything. You have the hand disruption. You have great threats, including threats that do double duty in the form of Chandra or Glorybringer. Those cards can be both threats and answers. So, yeah, black-red is such a powerful deck in Standard, in part because it's so customizable, and after sideboarding, it almost always, you wind up with the 60 cards tailor-made to beat whatever your opponent's throwing at you.
Our players here have drawn their opening hands for game number 2. Kevin Jones up a game over Owen Turtenwald. Owen keeping 7, Kevin Jones mulliganing here down to 6. And you mentioned Kevin Jones playing this Jeskai control deck. He kind of likes these colors, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is exactly where Kevin wants to be. He is he's a player who excels with mid-range, tempo, or control decks. In short, he really likes to pass the turn with mana available and have a lot of options available to him, and that's where he knows what to do, and he can take a close, complicated situation, he can see the path to victory, and he can navigate the game where he wants it to go.
I mean, if you're good at tempo, control, and mid-range decks, that's pretty good. You're only missing about one there.
Yeah. The only thing Kevin doesn't know how to do is, attack with a 2-drop creature, but I shouldn't say he doesn't know how. It's just not what.
I mean, he probably did in draft.
What he doesn't like.
Kevin Jones here going down to 6. Looks a little better.
But I should say that, Kevin wants to play to those complicated situations where he has a lot of options available to him, but he's against one of the absolute best players in the world, Owen Turtenwald. So if you get to that situation, Owen's not going to make a misstep. He's not going to make it easy on you. So Kevin with his work cut out for him.
Duress here from Owen Turtenwald. We're going to take a look at exactly what cards Kevin Jones kept. 3 lands, Harness Lightning, Teferi, and a Magma Spray.
Yeah, so a good 6-card hand from Kevin. It's the biggest issue here is that he's down on resources and Owen's duressing him. So he's starting the game with 5 cards. On Owen's side, it's pretty interesting to see Ether Hub duress because this is not an energy deck. He's not going to be able to recoup that lost energy and use the Ether Hub for colored mana after this. It indicates to me that he's probably going to play either Heart of Kirin or Scrap Heap Scrounger on turn 2. But we won't be seeing Goblin Chain Whirler on turn 3.
Teferi into the yard here was the choice from Owen Turtenwald. The land comes in tapped for Kevin Jones. Back over to Owen. Kari Zev is the play for Owen.
So here you see the flexibility of the black-red deck at work. You would normally think, okay, I'm going to duress and play my 2-drop attacker, so I'm going to take away the card that kills it and Harness Lightning. But no, Owen sees the texture of his own hand. He knows that Kevin took a mulligan. He knows that it's a post-sideboard game where he can go toe-to-toe with Kevin even into the mid and late game. So he's going to take the long-run approach. Let me capitalize on you taking a mulligan, take away your card advantage card. I'm happy to trade 1 for 1, and I'll find a way from there. We'll go into the mid-game, and I'm going to beat you there. That's what Owen's saying.
All right, pass back from Kevin Jones over to Owen once again. And we're going to go ahead and cycle here for Kevin. No play on 3 from Owen. Land came in tapped. I do see a Phoenix in hand for Turtenwald. Look there at Kevin Jones in our feature match area. Love the bearded dragon shirt. Trademark American flag hat.
Perfect for U.S. Nationals.
Oh, yes.
This man is a patriot.
As long as you guys choose the costumes of hamburgers and hot dogs, I will be fine. Just consider it. That's all I ask. One can be blueberry pie. Here's a Rekindling Phoenix for Owen Turtenwald. Kevin Jones taps 3. Whirler Virtuoso is the play. So you mentioned Chandra being a real key card for Owen in this matchup. How about Rekindling Phoenix?
Rekindling Phoenix is quite strong. It's often going to require Kevin to spend 2 removal spells. Now, Blue-white control is really well equipped to handle Rekindling Phoenix with Seal Away, Cast Out, Settle the Wreckage. Those all answer it, crisply and cleanly. But Kevin, with the red removal, Magma Spray doesn't quite get up to 3 damage, so he's going to have to answer it with a counterspell, a Teferi, or 2 red removal spells most of the time.
Well, if Kevin had to deal with 1 Phoenix, how about 2? Owen Turtenwald adds a second one to the battlefield, and Kevin Jones passed the turn right on back.
And the reason Owen didn't attack there is the one remaining card that we know about in Kevin's hand is Magma Spray. Owen saw it with the turn 1 duress, so Kevin can pair a Thopter token with the Magma Spray to permanently get rid of a Rekindling Phoenix.
Whew. Owen, though, has something to say about this unlicensed disintegration on the Thopter token.
Yeah, a rather aggressive play from Owen, but he's really just banking on these Phoenixes getting the job done. He's not in a position, he judges, to prepare for Kevin flashing in Torrential Gearhulk or something like that. He just wants to clear the way and attack uncontested in the air.
And there is that Magma Spray you mentioned that we knew was hiding out in Kevin Jones's hand. It's going to pair it with something here, Harness Lightning.
So really, really nice sequence from Kevin. He does spend 2 cards to permanently get rid of a Phoenix, but he also gets to bank 2 energy based on the way he sequenced it there, and that is exactly enough for 1 more Thopter token, which even in the worst case scenario, at least it's going to prevent 4 damage to him.
All right, so 1 Rekindling Phoenix connects. Kevin Jones down to 17. Whirler Virtuoso on the offense here as well for Kevin Jones. Turtenwald down to 18. Phoenix coming in again. Goblin Chain Whirler, the follow-up play for Turtenwald. Kevin Jones down to 9. And there is a Seal Away on the Phoenix.
The one answer in his deck that's a clean 1-for-1 against the Phoenix. That's off the sideboard, Seal Away.
Wow.
Remember, Kevin's deck is primarily blue and red, just touching into white for Teferi and a very small number of targeted answer cards in the sideboard.
We mentioned Kevin Jones not having access to Settle the Wreckage or Fumigate, cards that are kind of hallmarks of the control decks we're seeing right now in the metagame. But Seal Away, only 1 white mana, why not? Hazoret the Fervent hits the table for Turtenwald.
And you can see that turn 1 duress paying dividends here because Kevin has done a nice job protecting himself, matching Owen step by step, but he doesn't have that put away the game type of card. He doesn't have Teferi. He hasn't found a Torrential Gearhulk or a Glimmer of Genius. And this is giving Owen a lot of time to play out his hand, set things up the way he wants to. You saw him, playing really slow and carefully in not attacking with the Phoenix and only sending them into the red zone once he had Unlicensed Disintegration ready to go. And the reason Owen has this luxury is because he took away the Teferi on turn 1.
It's a great point, Reed. Chandra's going to come down, and we are going to minus on the Whirler Virtuoso. Goblin Chain Whirler gets in for a het, knocking Kevin Jones down to 6.
So there's the card, the best card in the matchup from Owen's perspective. It gets into play. It cleanly answers the Whirler Virtuoso. So Owen totally in the driver's seat now. Going into sideboarding, Maria, we had talked a little bit about Owen choosing his removal spells to match up as well as possible against the Torrential Gearhulks and the Whirler Virtuosos. But something that I should mention is this red-black deck has built-in answers to Whirler Virtuoso in Chandra and Glorybringer, even Goblin Chain Whirler. So what that means is that Owen has ways to beat that card without having to devote dedicated slots to his deck. So he's going to play whatever number of Unlicensed Disintegrations and Abrades he wants against those Torrential Gearhulks. And those, sure, can kill a Whirler Virtuoso once in a while, but he doesn't have to worry too much about that card because he can manage it with Gearhulk and Chandra, or with Glorybringer and Chandra.
Owen Turtenwald tying things up here, 1 game apiece versus Kevin Jones here in our quarterfinals. U.S. Nationals Black-Red versus Jeskai Control. Yeah, the Goblin Chain Whirler you'll find is often just a 3/3 for 3 when you're playing versus a control deck, but not so. You mentioned the Whirler Virtuoso. You get a little value there.
Yeah, I think Kevin being the savvy player that he is, he's going to try not to leave his Thopter tokens vulnerable to a Chain Whirler, but Owen can force the issue a little bit. Imagine he points a removal spell at the Virtuoso. Kevin spends all his energy before the creature hits the graveyard, and then those Thopters are just sitting there ready to get Chain Whirled.
Get Chain Whirled. I love it.
As we all have so many times.
Oh, yes. Unfortunately. Do you think these red decks exist without Chain Whirler?
Yeah. Mono Red has been strong for a long time, even before Chain Whirler was printed. But Chain Whirler definitely changes the dynamic. It improves the matchup dramatically against something like a Toolcraft Exemplar deck, a Llanowar Elves deck. So it really is format warping in that sense and gives Mono Red an extra tool that's really important in a lot of matchups.
Update from our back table. We have Nikolai winning 2-0 over Brent Clausen. Update for you from our top 8 there.
So that's our number 1 seed, Matthew Nikolai, with blue-black mid-range, taking out our 1 mono-red player in the top 8.
So what's changing here moving into Game 3? This is kind of an area that, a lot of more casual players or people who aren't just at the level of people like Kevin Jones and Owen Turtenwald might not think about as much. Like, hey, I sideboarded for Game 2. Why would I make any changes going into Game 3?
Okay, well, the biggest difference is that Kevin is now going to be on the play instead of Owen. So I think it's likely to change things more for Kevin than for Owen. Owen more or less has a situation where it's going to be clear what his good and bad cards are against a control deck, and I think he even kept Bomat Courier in his... Oh, excuse me. Owen was on the play for Game 2, so he could consider trimming Bomat Courier for Game 3 if he felt like Kevin's going to have Whirler Virtuoso and play too often. He's got too many removal spells. But, if I know Owen, I think he's probably not changing much on the draw, and he'll have those cheap threats anyway. Kevin, on the other hand, he can reevaluate and tailor his answers a little better. For example, Disallow and Syncopate are cards that are going to be stronger when Kevin's on the play because he has a higher chance of being able to pass with open mana on a clean board in those early turns, whereas if he packs his deck too full of those reactive counterspells when he's on the draw, he could find himself in a position where he has to tap mana to fight Owen's early creatures and then just doesn't have the luxury of passing with permission mana up. So you might see him have 1 or 2 or 3 more counterspells in his deck for this game when he's on the play than he might have for Game 2.
How much of a difference is being on the play making here for Kevin Jones?
A lot. And that's the most important dynamic is being ready with the counterspell when Owen starts playing his potent threats, which is something that's a lot more challenging when the red deck is on the play.
Here we go. Opening hands drawn for game number 3 here in our quarterfinal match between Kevin Jones and Owen Turtenwald, currently ranked number 3 in the world. And we are underway. Kevin Jones on Jeskai Control, Owen Turtenwald on Black-Red. Kevin Jones on the play.
Both players happy with their hands. We mentioned this is a really close, interesting matchup. I think we're going to have quite a game on our hands.
Kari Zev met with a Harnessed Lightning from Jones.
The 3-color mana base is really powerful, being able to pair stuff like Irrigated Farmland with Sulphur Falls, then coming into play untapped. Really bad news for Owen, passing on turn 3 with no land drop, and so now Kevin gets that luxury of being able to pass with open mana on an empty board, ready with the counter spells, perhaps having luxury to cast Glimmer of Genius, and if we see him get Teferi into play uncontested, like we did in Game 1, it's going to be really bad news for Owen.
Pia Nalar was good for a minute. Magma Spray sends her into exile, but the Thopter token remains here for Owen.
Actually, a pretty good turn for Owen. What he really didn't want to see was Glimmer of Genius from Kevin Jones, and he gets to play Pia Nalar, which only gets answered, 1/2 for 1. Thopter token hanging around.
Sure, and no Teferi there on 5 from Jones.
Yeah, so all of the complete nightmare situations were dodged from Owen's perspective.
All right, we found another land as well. And we're going for it. There's Chandra. This one's going to get censored.
And props to Kevin for hanging on to that sensor for dear life. He didn't cycle,
yeah.
even despite not having his best cards to play. He didn't get impatient. He didn't dig for a Teferi or a Glimmer. He kept the sensor because he knew with Owen missing land drops, he was going to be able to tag something.
Thopter token in for another one. Jones down to 18. We'll see if Owen had something else to do here on 4. 3 for Chain Whirler. Disallow.
Okay, so Owen doing a nice job hitting his land drops. Canyon Slough sets him up for black mana and, potentially 5 or 6 mana to spend next turn. He can get right back into this.
I know he has a duress in hand as well.
So in both of these sideboard games, Kevin has gotten a little bit stuck in the mid and late game. He didn't have his card advantage cards, which potentially is just him getting unlucky, but potentially, it brings up the question of how do you sideboard against a deck like Red-Black, because you need to pack your deck full of cheap answer cards to keep your life total high and keep pace. But at a certain point, your control deck's not going to function if you take out all your Search for Azkantas and Glimmer of Geniuses. So Kevin trying to walk that line. Looks like he found Glimmer of Genius, which is going to allow him to stay in the game. But, he didn't hit the Glimmer when he really wanted to, which was a turn or two ago. And now he's got to fight on even footing or potentially even from behind instead of just getting the easy win against an opponent that missed land drops.
Glorybringer hits the table for Owen Turtenwald, smashes in, knocking Kevin Jones down to 13. And there was that Glimmer that you mentioned. We'll see if it's enough to pull Kevin Jones kind of out of this mess. Here's a duress. Harness Lightning in response takes down Glorybringer. And there is a Magma Spray to deal with a Thopter token. And take a look at my mountain. That's all I've got, says Kevin Jones.
So Kevin is cleaned out, and here, this is it. I mean, clearing the way for Glorybringer. It only takes a couple of hits uncontested for Glorybringer to win the game. Kevin does not have many draw steps left. What's he going to find?
Glorybringer hit in there, knocking Kevin Jones down to 9. He drew something. It's a Glimmer.
That's just what he wants.
Taking a look here, we're going to leave 1 on top. Glimmer of Genius just pulling Kevin Jones back into this game. There's that Whirler Virtuoso.
Amazing turn for Kevin. So he glimmers to find himself 2 action cards. One of them is Whirler Virtuoso, which is probably the best card for buying time. It's not going to answer the Glorybringer outright, particularly because the Glorybringer can just exert to kill it. But he can make 2 Thopter tokens, which block, gaining himself effectively 8 life in this kind of situation is really big.
Hazaret from Owen Turtenwald. And there's a land. What do you like Owen doing here?
Well, definitely attacking with both creatures. The exert question is, I think I would exert, because you lose a turn of attacking with the Glorybringer, but at minimum, the Whirler can block Hazaret and prevent 5 damage, so it's worth it to clear out the blocker, even at the expense of Glorybringer not untapping.
Unlicensed Disintegration takes out one of the Thopter tokens as well.
Okay, so that's a forced block from Kevin there. Blocks the Hazaret, drops to 5. He's got his most powerful card in hand, Torrential Gearhulk. But he has to choose between flashing back a Glimmer of Genius or finding Harness Lightning to kill Glorybringer. He still needs to find more if he's going to win. He's at 5 against the Hazaret.
2 energy.
But I'll tell you, Maria, as bad as the battlefield looks for Kevin Jones, he is not out of this yet. Because he has Gearhulk, which can block Hazaret. He can flashback Glimmer, digging for answers. He has 1 turn of reprieve where the Glorybringer is not going to untap. And if he can find something, and if Owen doesn't draw a helpful card, then he might be able to get the Hazaret off the table.
All right, so he's going for the Glimmer here. Let's see what he can find. Can Kevin Jones find the cards he needs to get him out? And he kept both of them. Pass the turn back over to Owen Turtenwald. 2 cards in hand for Kevin Jones, both found off that Glimmer of Genius. Down to 5 life. Duress.
So a pretty nice play from Owen. It puts Kevin in a rough spot, but remember that this is coming at the expense of discarding it for 2 damage. So, this is a pretty good draw from Owen, but probably only marginally better than any random card that he could have thrown with Hazoret. And Kevin has good options. He's, I think, deciding about casting the Glimmer in response.
So you made the decision not to. What is the benefit here? Like, these are just what I've got?
Well, it's really good if Owen decides to take the Teferi that Kevin can Glimmer afterwards, because then he has more information about what he needs, and Owen will not know what's in Kevin's hand. So that's pretty beneficial if Kevin, pieced together that Owen was going to take the Teferi no matter what. Then this is a great play.
Sure enough, Owen takes the Teferi, and here's the Glimmer of Genius. So Kevin Jones is going to load up with a couple of new cards. He's going to scry 1 to the top, 1 to the bottom. And like you said, Owen won't know what these ones are.
He must find an answer to Glorybringer. That is step 1 here.
Well, one of the cards is a Whirler Virtuoso. One is a Teferi.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my gosh.
Kevin finding everything that he needs here.
This game has been so swingy.
Definitely. And one play that we somewhat glossed over was Owen spending Unlicensed Disintegration on the Thopter token. It makes a lot of sense to force through damage. Your opponent was off balanced and really struggling, so it makes sense to force the advantage and get your opponent low, particularly when you have Hazoret to bleed out the last few points of damage. However, the way it worked out was Torrential Gearhulk then came down as a permanent blocker for the Hazoret. So, I'll be curious to talk to Owen and find out if he maybe thought about just trying to fight through the Thopters on a slower basis and hold up the Unlicensed Disintegration for a Gearhulk.
And here's a Harness Lightning to take care of the Glorybringer. And Owen says, go. Thopter added to the table here for Kevin Jones. And now Kevin Jones has everything he could possibly want on the table, it looks like.
Yeah, he was at death's door. He needed to, he needed a few turns of finding card draw into multiple key cards, but he found it. He stabilized the board. Now he's got a Planeswalker, and if Owen can't muster anything, he's actually dead just to combat damage next turn.
Scrap Heap Scrounger, the play here for Turtenwald, just a land in hand. And Magma Spray, the perfect answer to that card. An Essence Scatter living in Kevin Jones's hand. Let's make another Thopter. And this has been an incredible comeback from Kevin Jones. Looked rough for Owen in the start of the game when he couldn't seem to get enough lands. But here's the handshake. Kevin Jones advancing to the semifinals over Owen Turtenwald. Jeskai Control over Black Red. Kevin Jones saying, hey, I love these colors. I love playing this kind of deck. And I'm going to bring a deck to the table that not everybody has been playing. All right, let's take a look at one of our other tables here. Justin Andrus versus Christopher Anderson. We have White-Blue Godpharaoh's Gift versus Esper Control. And it looks like to be just wrapping up here. Didn't get a chance to really see the board state or what might have happened, but Justin Andrus was leading 1-0.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, looks like it's tied up. So
all right, tied up.
We tuned in just in time to start Game 3. That Owen Turtenwald, Kevin Jones match was as close and as fun as advertised. Kevin Jones advancing. And meanwhile, we have probably our 2 coolest decks in the top 8. Christopher Anderson playing White-Blue Godpharaoh's Gift. I suppose this is a deck that we've seen before, but really had a breakout last weekend, winning Grand Prix Singapore and putting Jack Kiefer into the top 4 of Grand Prix Pittsburgh. On the other side, we have an Esper control deck, but not just any Esper control deck. This is definitely a home brew.
Whoa!
This has a lot of unusual card choices and some notable absences, too. This is one of 4 blue-black based decks in our top 8. What all these decks are going to have in common is that they're leaning heavily on Vraska's Contempt and that they're looking to curve removal spells into the Scarab God. But what Justin Andrus has is a splash for white for Teferi. He has no Torrential Gearhulks. He's leaning not so much on counterspells, but 4 copies of Doomfall.
Wow.
3 copies also of Yeheni's Expertise, which is a powerful but not often played card. And I really love that particular combo of Yeheni's Expertise into Doomfall. Clean up the little tokens, Doomfall to exile your biggest creature, or take away your follow-up threat. So that's a really good 1-2 punch. And I think Justin just really brewed his own deck with all the cards that he likes. He identifies these patterns that he wants to play towards, and here he is in the top 8 of U.S. Nationals with it.
Single copy of Cast Out as well in the main deck, and the Eldest Reborn.
Yeah, so he really likes making his opponent sacrifice a creature.
This is kind of interesting to me. Filigree Familiar hiding out there in the sideboard.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's a card that not many control players use against red, but it's pretty effective. It's a roadblock. It gains you 2 life, draws you a card if it trades or chump blocks.
It's adorable.
It's adorable.
All right, Game 3. Here we go in our quarterfinals. Esper Control in the hands of Justin Andrus versus Christopher Anderson's White-Blue GPG. Glint Sleeve Siphoner here for Justin on turn 2.
Looking over the deck lists and the bracket, I had actually picked Christopher Anderson to be a really big favorite in this matchup, particularly because of Justin's judgment call to lean more heavily on discard and not have as much permission. But the fact that he won Game 1 and has advanced to a sideboard game where he gets to be on the play, it makes me reconsider my initial prediction. I think he might now be the favorite to win this, especially with a good start with Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
2 Search for Ascantas in play, 1 for each player here. Christopher Anderson getting the first opportunity to scry here, and he likes it. Keeps the land. And we've talked a lot about Glint Sleeve Siphoner either being in or being out of players' decks. This weekend in particular, a lot of people kind of living a little bit in fear of the Chain Whirler. And some saying, you know what? If it survives, it's just so worth it to put it in my deck. Champion of Wits here for Anderson.
Yeah, Siphoner's tricky because it's one of the worst cards against the Goblin Chain Whirler decks, but one of the best cards against blue-white control and a lot of the other decks in the format.
Worth the risk, do you think?
I think so. I mean, it's worth asking whether you want to put it in your main deck and sideboard it out a lot, or whether you want to put it in your sideboard and bring it in a lot. But I think either decision is pretty reasonable, and the players who have been playing blue-black mid-range or control with 4 Siphoners have been performing pretty well, so it seems like it's a decision that's certainly in the realm of being reasonable.
Arguel's Bloodfast now in play for Justin Andrus as well, speaking of drawing cards.
Good setup for Christopher Anderson so far. He's able to dump a God Pharaoh's Gift and an Angel of Invention into his graveyard. He doesn't have the refurbish, but he's all set if he ever finds it.
Champion of Wits hits in here for 2. Yeah, whenever I see that God Pharaoh's Gift in the yard and 4 mana in the hands of a white-blue God Pharaoh's Gift player, I get very nervous. Let's draw a card here for Justin off the Bloodfast. Negate's a pretty good one.
Meanwhile, in our 4th quarterfinals matchup, Brown has defeated Bernal 2-0. That was a blue-black pseudo-mirror. Two different takes on the blue-black color combination, but like I mentioned, both decks just looking to leverage Vraska's Contempt and the Scarab God.
Cast out here from Anderson. What are you getting rid of?
Well, the first question is it going to resolve? And
Sure.
You notice the dilemma for Justin Andrus is that he has only 1 blue mana. So if he's to negate this, shields are down and he's totally naked against something like a refurbish. This is the power of Christopher Anderson being able to operate at instant speed, present 2 threats, and overload the mana of Justin Andrus. I think Justin will probably let this go, and Christopher he goes with this Siphoner. I mean, 3 really threatening permanents on Justin's side, and that's another thing that allows Justin the flexibility of letting that card resolve, that cast out. It's because even if one of his sources of card advantage goes away, he still has 2 more.
Strategic planning here for Anderson. Looks at the top 3. 1 in the hand, the rest in the yard. White-blue God-Pharaoh's Gift. It's definitely a deck that allows you to play not only the cards in your hand, but also the cards in your graveyard.
Yeah, and that's one of the main advantages in this control matchup. You would normally think of a combo deck that relies on a lot of setup and resolving one particular card to be weak against a deck with counterspells, but the matchup is a lot more complicated than that because Christopher Anderson has these cards that can eternalize from the graveyard. He has Search for Escanta, so he can do a lot without casting or resolving any spells.
And we talked about how precious that negate is in this matchup, and there we see it used on that strategic planning.
Yep, and part of that is Justin wants to prevent Christopher's Search for Escanta from transforming.
Duress here from Justin, taking a peek at Christopher Anderson's hand. Another Search, God-Pharaoh's Gift, and some negates.
Yep, got to imagine one of those negates is going to get taken away.
You know, I've heard people say before if, somebody has redundant cards in their hand when you're duressing them, that it's more valuable to take something that's not redundant. But in this case, we've already got a Search on the table. God-Pharaoh's Gift in the yard, just as bad as in the hand.
Right. Yeah, that's a good general tip, but in this case, the Search is redundant, and the God-Pharaoh's Gift is pretty far from being cast. So I think just fighting through those negates is going to have to happen sooner or later. Justin might as well pick sooner.
All right, back over to Christopher Anderson's turn. Scry here off the Search. Keeps it in hand. And it looks like it, considering that we're chart a course here.
And really interesting to me that he cast it before attacking. He actually wants to discard a card. If I were in his position, I would be more interested in card quantity than filling my graveyard.
And why is that?
Well, just because the game is shaping up to go long, and I'm not anticipating getting a quick win with Refurbish. But either way, the card's going to get countered.
Champion of Wits in for 2. Justin Anderson's turn to scry now, and Liliana is going to end up in the graveyard. Scarab God goes to hand.
Makes a lot of sense. He's already got Teferi if he wants to tap out for a Haymaker type of card, but tapping out is not exactly what he wants, even though he did clear the way with Duress. But here's a nice play. He gets to play Scarab God, which can't be negated. But the shields are down. If Christopher Anderson finds his Refurbish this turn, the game's going to change a lot.
All right, well, we're able to transform into Escanta the Sunken Rune here. Get 5 mana in play for Christopher Anderson. 2 God-Pharaoh's Gifts in hand.
This was the turn. This was the opportunity for Chris to get a little lucky and take the game, but now things are getting really bad for him. It's very tough for the graveyard-based deck to beat the Scarab God once it's in play. The white-blue God-Pharaoh's Gift deck doesn't have access to a lot of removal, so it's hard for him to fight back from this position. And I think it's just going to be a matter of time before Justin, who's able to now pass with all his mana open and make some nice plays with the Scarab God or Argyle's Bloodfast, before he's able to find a way to take this game over.
Yeah, you mentioned it, the Scarab God versus a deck that wants to be taking things from the graveyard.
Right, like imagine Christopher is even able to assemble his combo here,
No
get a
good.
God-Pharaoh's Gift into play. He has only one creature in the graveyard. Justin can just take it.
Search for Escanta here for Christopher Anderson in response. Thank you. I would like your Angel of Invention, says the Scarab God. We're going to put 2 counters on it.
Sure. Who doesn't want a 6/6 flying lifelink zombie?
Oof.
It represents a 2-turn clock just by itself
Yep.
because of the 1 life loss from the Scarab God. That's 7 and 7. So all Justin has to do is hunker down and survive this turn, and he should win fairly effortlessly. He can even attack with the Scarab God this turn, because if Chris spends his mana on unearthing the champion, he's just dead.
Yep, sure enough, Scarab God gets in there as well as the Angel of Invention.
A forced block from Anderson.
Champion of Wits has to jump in front here. Life totals are going to swing in the opposite direction. Scarab God's going to take that Champion of Wits for itself. Christopher Anderson down to 7, Justin Andrus at 15.
Yep, he picked up 5 cards there because the champion gets +1/+1 from Angel of Invention.
Hostage Taker into the yard for Justin Andrus, a card we don't often see in Standard right now.
No, but it's a nice one to have access to it at instant speed with the Scarab God.
Christopher Anderson digging a little bit here, chart a course. Goes to hand, draws Field of Ruin. But look at that side of the battlefield for Justin. Draw another 2, and there is a refurbish. Too little, too late. There are no creatures in that graveyard. And there is the handshake. Justin Andrus taking down that match 2-1 over Christopher Anderson. That is Esper Control, kind of a home brew, beating White-Blue Godpharaoh's Gift, one of the strongest decks coming into this weekend.
So that sets us up for Justin Andrus against Kevin Jones, both with their really unique take on control, both of them building a Teferi deck with the cards that they like to play with most, the ones that they found they could navigate through a field of red Chain Whirler decks, control, various mid-range decks, and here they are facing off against one another in the semifinals for a spot on the U.S. national team.
I just love when players are able to bring their own kind of unique take on decks, if not a whole deck, new deck altogether. Here's a look at our bracket with the flag waving in the background there. Matthew Nikolai versus Dylan Brown will be coming up here in the semifinals. Kevin Jones and Justin Andrus, as you said, will also face each other in the semis. Just out of curiosity, Reed, who do you like better, Kevin Jones or Justin?
What do you mean, like as a person?
Yeah, just personally, which guy do you like better? Which deck do you favor in that matchup?
I have to say Kevin Jones' Jeskai deck because of the counter spells. I think there's going to be a lot of 1-for-1 trading, and Justin has access to all the hand disruption, but the 1-for-1 trading with Kevin